So, I feel like a lot of the time classics get put on this pedestal. There's the sense of, you know, if you don't like them, then you're dumb and you can't understand them and that's why you don't like them. And I really hate that. You know, you're allowed to not like a classic. You're allowed to hate certain things about them, and sometimes you hate one because, yeah, you couldn't understand it, because sometimes the writing style is super pretentious or super long-winded in a way that it doesn't need to be, because, you know, the author was getting paid per word and just jammed in a bunch of extra stuff, or sometimes the themes don't make any sense or the characters are really unlikable. And I feel like we should be allowed to talk about that more. So I want to make sure that people know that they can have unpopular opinions about classics as well. And so today I thought I'd go over some classics, some that I just hated, some that I appreciated but that had aspects that I really just couldn't get behind, didn't like, thought were really tedious. So yeah, let's dive right into the tea. Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier. This one was another one I was super hyped to read. I really enjoyed Frenchmans Creek by Daphne du Maurier, and I knew it was about this sort of like criminal underworld dealing with the piracy at the time. So I was really hyped to get into this, and in the end, I again found it super tedious. Very sort of odd. In Frenchman's Creek, there was a really cute, bantery, sort of almost wholesome romance in Frenchman's Creek, and I thought I'd be getting that again, but instead, the romance I thought was super underdeveloped, didn't make a lot of sense. I was like, why do you like this man the whole time? It follows this girl who, her mother died, so she has to go live with her aunt, and her aunt is married to this awful man, and she hates living there at Jamaica Inn, and there's something weird going on. She really doesn't trust her uncle. He's really mean and like threatens to abuse her, and just like holds all this stuff over her head. He was really creepy. Even though he is her uncle, he was making all these horrible insinuations toward her. And then the guy that is her love interest is his brother. And so every time she looks at him, she's like, oh, I saw my uncle in his eyes. And I was like, why do you like him? And he didn't really do a lot to like get in her good graces either. Like, I didn't find him to be a romantic figure. He genuinely was kind of like the uncle that was awful. Like, he didn't have enough redeeming qualities for me to be like, oh, he's, you know, he's different. Especially because the heroine keeps drawing those connections, which I was like, stop. And if just like a bunch of terrible things keep happening and the heroine isn't really good at like processing them, they just sort of happen to her and she's like, wow, this sucks. I wish I could see my uncle's brother. And yeah, I thought this was a real letdown from the high that Frenchman's Creek left me on. I unfortunately cannot recommend this, even though I could recommend Frenchman's Creek. I think that one's really great. This one really missed the mark for me on the suspense and the mystery and the romance. All of it I just could not get into. It took me a while to get through, even though it's a relatively short read. Yeah, this one I was so sad about. Another one that I really couldn't get behind was The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. This one, I'd heard it was like a really well done, creepy sort of ghost story, and it's literally only like 150 pages long, and I was like, this story could have been like 25 pages long. I think this is a critique that Henry James gets a lot. He'll use like 600 words when he could have used 18, and it's really evident, and it's definitely not my thing. I thought a lot of the sentences were super run-on. A lot of the language was super convoluted. I think that Henry James could have benefited from like a mean creative writing teacher that taught him about how concise was better. I don't always agree with that, but in this case, I was like, oh my gosh, I wish he would just write in a way that got to the point and didn't bring us on these meandering sentences that you need to like go back and piece together. It was really the writing that was the culprit for me. I couldn't get into the story. I couldn't appreciate any of the like weird, creepy aspects because I was just like so annoyed at every page. And I feel like it took me an age to get through, even though, again, it's super... I mean, this is actually a bind up with Daisy Miller, which I did like Daisy Miller better, but The Turn of the Screw, I was expecting this like really cool Victorian ghost story, and instead I was just like annoyed from start to finish. The base of the story is that it's about these two creepy kids, and they're really freaking out their governess, and she's trying to like figure out what the hell is going on and why they're so creepy. And there's like ghost sightings and stuff in it, so it has all the makings of this fantastic ghost story. But yeah, unfortunately, do not recommend this book. Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott. This was a classic that I was so excited for. I was so hyped to read. This is the book that they say sort of started the historical fiction genre. It was written in the Regency era, and it is based in medieval England. It's about knights and Robin Hood, and it sort of cemented what would become our modern day view of Robin Hood. So I had such high expectations. I was so looking forward to reading this. And then I thought it was such a slog to get through. I felt like my eyes glazing over for such an exciting book. People fighting for their king and defying nobles, even at the risk of their life, and adventures and romance. Like, it has everything that should make it such an exciting and good classic, and I found it to just be somehow pretty dry. I thought it was kind of boring reading it. By the end, it was like I couldn't wait for it to be over. I didn't really like any of the characters. And yeah, it was, I mean, not even Robin Hood and his merry men could save this book for me. I'm not sure if I'm going to try Walter Scott again. I would be interested in reading his novel Waverley, but I don't know, this one really left me disappointed. It definitely didn't help that I had such high hopes for it, but it is with a heavy heart that I'd have to say I cannot recommend this book. Another one that kind of let me down was The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. This one is, I don't hold it in the same sort of level of vitriol as the other ones, because I did enjoy reading this, but there were some aspects that really just sort of irked me. It is pretty groundbreaking of a classic because it's about this woman who moves into Wildfell Hall, and she's really mysterious. She doesn't have a husband to be spoken of, but she does have a son. And so everybody in the town is really curious about this woman. They don't know her background. They're pretty sure she's not a widow and that she has some mysterious past. And so the protagonist is really sort of taken with her and wants to get to know her and find out what happened to drive her here and become so secretive. And I mean, it's not really a spoiler to say that this woman left her husband, which was very interesting to read about. It's such a unique perspective coming from the Victorian era. I think it did a lot of good things in showing this woman sort of coming into her own and leaving her husband behind her. But I think that it sort of tries too hard to like prove that she's not this like wicked fallen woman. There's a lot of emphasis on religion and being pious, and like a lot of the time religion and piety is involved in classics because it's just so ingrained in the European culture of that time to be religious and God-fearing and all that stuff. And normally, like, that doesn't bother me. You can see that it brings something and adds something usually, but in this, I felt it was really over the top, and it was just too much in a way that started to feel inauthentic to me. And when I finished reading it, I realized that it felt like Anne Bronte was trying to make her main heroine here like overly religious to sort of prove that even though she was this like wicked woman in the eyes of society, she was still good because she was so pious. Like, that's the point of the book, is that you can be this awful person in the eyes of society, but that doesn't mean that like God will judge you and stuff like that. And I understand that, but for me, as someone who's not religious, that was such a big part of her redeeming qualities that I just couldn't relate to it. And yeah, it felt really sort of like if she hadn't been pious, then she wouldn't have been a redeemable character, especially in the eyes of the hero. I still think that this is a good book, and it's definitely worth the read, and it's a really interesting examination of something that would have been so taboo at the time. It sort of just fell short for me in that respect. Again, I don't like hate this book, and I would read it again. It was just like, was kind of disappointing to me, and at least, you know, it makes sense. It was just a bit too much for me. So that's my list of classics that I did not like. Some of them, there was just one aspect that rubbed me the wrong way, and some of them I was like, throw the whole book away. Please let me know if you agree or disagree severely on any of these, or if you have other classics that you just really couldn't enjoy, really couldn't get into. And yeah, don't be afraid to start a smear campaign against some classics. I don't think that they belong on any sort of pretentious, you know, pedestal. They're not inherently better than other modern literature, and they can be so much fun to read as long as you remember that they are just books like any other books, and you can hate them or love them just like you can with, you know, fantasy or YA or contemporary romance. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe and all that. Leave a comment calling me a heathen if you think I'm wrong in these opinions. And all my links for Goodreads and all that stuff are in the description bar. Yeah, thanks so much for watching. Bye.